Okay, so we're very glad to have David Hughes with us today. David is professor in the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics at the University of Tennessee. He's going to talk to us about the steps to submitting a strong package. And he's going to take this just one step at a time, go through the application form with us, help us understand what's being asked for. And David has been with us since the very beginning when we first started having these workshops. He's partnered with us and has a wealth of experience and expertise when it comes to putting together an application like this, or looking at what's involved in doing some type of a feasibility study. So he is well versed in this area, and I know that you'll enjoy listening to him today as he provides some insights here. So thank you so much, David, for joining us.
Thanks, Al, and thanks, Ann. I really enjoyed your presentation as well as everybody else's. And a lot of what I'm going to do is really going to build on what Ann says. Now, I'm going to not go through everything on the toolkit working capital application, but I'll go through a lot of it. And I'm going to go through sequentially. So for example, we'll go through the executive summary first because that pops up early in the process, but doesn't mean that her advice of doing things in that order, like doing the appendices fairly early, that makes all the sense in the world. And another thing that I'm sure you got a sense from what she said, in doing this application, you can cut and paste a lot. In other words, you can don't be repetitive, just be repetitive. But if you have something in the appendix, use that up front if it's appropriate. You want to be consistency, and doing cutting and pasting and working things in helps to ensure consistency. Okay, so why apply for a evaluated producer grant? We're going to go into that. We're going to look at who has received them, especially in terms of place, in terms of Tennessee versus other places. And a lot of this I'm going to run through because Chuck and others have covered this pretty well. Then we'll look at the overview of that evaluated producer application. So now we're talking about that toolkit that you should use in building your application or working with a consultant in building the application, however you decide to proceed. Then we'll look at project scoring, what makes a really good application, and that's key. What you need to kind of hit, how you need to approach things, like for example, in discussing match and discussing your work plan and describing the process of what you want to do, and then we'll have a summary. Well, why apply? Well, you want to implement your dream, which is what I think all of our speakers have emphasized this. It is a way to help test new ideas with less personal financial risk. So you're sharing at least some of that risk if you get some of this grant money. And really, you want to use it to increase your profitability. Everybody has pointed this out, but also will make the statement, the information you collect, it's going to be useful to you regardless of whether you get funds, okay? So if your grant's successful or not, it's still very useful. It also can facilitate collaborations. So for example, if you do get a letter of support of somebody you're going to provide a market to, you might have established a relationship that will further your business in the future. And also facilitates access to resources. You learn where various resources are and expertise, and we've talked about that. You're evaluating your idea, your ideas, you're developing a business plan and depending a feasibility study. And then of course you want to use it to access other funding. So once you get through with your application, whether you're successful or not, hold on to that material, back it up electronically in more than one place, because you want to be able to pull that out and apply for other kinds of funding like TDA funding, or if you do another value-added producer grant or a REAP grant, sometime in the future. Where have they gone? Well, mostly historically, they haven't gone to Tennessee. And that was one of the main reasons that Hal and I, really the main reason that Hal and I started this training effort, was to try to change this scenario. And I think that has really started to happen in the state, a little bit in our efforts, but also because of the efforts of all these people that, have already presented. So historically, this was roughly the first decade, 2001 to 2010. Tennessee, so this program's been around for quite a while. Tennessee averaged 0.5 successful grant applications a year. So every other year we were getting an application that was successful. And only 8 states were behind Tennessee, including places like the District of Columbia. So Tennessee really historically has lagged behind. And we can see, although it's starting to improve, this is fiscal year 2016, Tennessee was still behind places like North Carolina and Virginia. We could show up similar numbers for states like Georgia. For example, we had 4, Virginia had 20. We had about $350,000 in funding. Virginia had almost $4 million. And if you did those ratios, the Virginia dollars would be almost 11 to 1. And the number of successful applications would be 5 to 1. So we're starting to do a little better, but still, a ways to go. Now you can look at our efforts over time, and you can see we really took off in 2020 with that over $22 million that Chuck's already presented in the 12 that were successful. And then you can see that we're really catching up with the neighbors. This is the 2020 awards in Georgia, Virginia, and Tennessee. And you can see we're really pretty much in line with them now. Georgia had 1 more, Virginia had 2 more. They both have a little bit more in funding, but we're no longer talking about $11 to 1. We're talking about roughly now $1.5 to 1, and just 1 or 2 more successful applications. So people in the state, both the people applying and the people that have supported that, really should be commended. And there's a whole host of people that have enabled that. Of course, in particular, the folks with the State Office of Rural Development should especially be applauded. This is similar to some stuff Chuck threw out as well. This just shows the working capital and planning. Primarily working capital has predominated. Chuck showed the most recent number and even more working capital. But for example, 88% of successful applicants, the 219 in 2018 were working capital versus planning. And of course, working capital is going to get a lot more funding just because of the caps and what you're doing with it. Now, Chuck also threw out a slide that's real similar to this, but his main point and my main point is the key is an eligible submission. Okay. So in 2018, 556 were submitted, roughly just a little over 2/3 were eligible. Okay. So just under 2/3 or 66%, 249 of the eligible submissions received funding. You want to get funded, be eligible. If you're eligible, historically, you have a better than 50% chance of getting the money. So people have good ideas, but they got to do the proposal right. They got to meet all the requirements, or USDA rural development, they might think it's the greatest idea in the world, but if you're violating one of the rules, they have to throw it out. Okay, so make yourself eligible. And it's a tricky process. Like I was amazed, Rick Riddle's a master of applying for funds, and even he sent one in that wasn't eligible. So that's just another reason to really consider working with a grant writer, perhaps, especially if it's your first one. And then definitely get it in early where USDA Rural Development can go over that proposal. The earlier the better, and give you some advice in terms of eligibility. Okay, this round there's 33 million, and there's the dates: the March 16th for the electronic, postmarked by March 22nd. If you're going to mail it in, you can hand deliver same date. Hand delivered might be best. And reiterating again, a few weeks in advance so they can review. And we encourage you to contact your Tennessee office of USDA Rural Development if seriously considering an application. There's a link to their website, and you can see down here below. Actually, I think one of the versions you have, this might be the wrong address, but this is the right address, the 441 Donaldson Pike, number 310 is the actual address for the state office. So not the state office, but the federal office is the decision makers. You can also send it to the rural development offices, the regional ones, and we're going to send out a better map. Some of these email contacts are apparently incorrect. Okay, so get in the queue early and work with USDA Rural Development, and really consider working with a grant writer, especially if you're new to the process. So somebody like an Ann, I know we can't endorse her personally, but somebody like that that's really good at getting these and has a lot of experience. Okay, of course, we have the two types, the planning grant and the working capital. Both require one-to-one match. So if you apply for 125,000, you're documenting 250,000, and you source 125,000. Now that can be your time, it can be your family's time, it can be inventory, for example. It could be a free contribution that, say, a consultant makes, for example. Things like equipment, you need to be real careful with it. If it's equipment, it has to be eligible equipment even for a match, so you can't use your building for a match. And we'll talk about this more a little later on, but be reasonable. So for example, if you're using a church hall for a match, now do people usually pay for a church hall? No, it's usually provided for free. So that's probably not a good match unless you can document that, there'll be a payment made for that, or people in general pay for the use of that church hall if you got it for free. The planning grant is for applicants who have not completed the required planning activities. It can support feasibility studies, business plans, marketing plans. You can hire planners, lawyers, accountants, or other qualified consultants to complete the planning activities and related expenses. And in fact, I've done a feasibility study that was funded by one of these. So a feasibility study is a report by a independent third party that analyzes the business ventures prospects for success. Now, actually, you can, if you're writing a feasibility study, you can be involved in the process, but you definitely need some outside people that are still involved to at least okay it or kind of rubber stamp it. But a feasibility study lays out the features of the business plan and critiques them, strengths and weaknesses, and overall feasibility, okay? The planning grant's usually for 12 months, and it has a $75,000 cap. Working capital grants, you must have completed planning activities. You got to have a business plan and financial projections required. And in fact, you will use that throughout the application process in kind of bits and pieces. An exception is the simplified version. We're going to talk about in the next slide and then kind of ignore it, but it will pop up in that form. But your funds can go to marketing and advertising expenses. like the legal expenses of organizing the venture. Rick Riddle mentioned that. If you needed an accounting system, if you wanted to implement a marketing program or plan. So for example, if you wanted to pay for developing a website, that should, be funds. You could put that in as something where you request to be funded. Certain operating or processing costs, such as salaries and supplies, so you could help pay your workers, and even some inventory, which would be your raw product that you're going to put into that production process. It can be for up to 36 months, but as little as 12 months. You got to demonstrate the project need. You must show all grant matching funds will be spent within the designated time frame. And when we get into the nuts and bolts of the toolkit, hopefully that'll be more apparent to you, kind of how you do that. And the cap is 250. That simplified working capital grant, you don't need a feasibility study or business plan, but you must show increase in customer base and revenue. And that simplified version caps under 50,000. And I don't think the USDA people can correct me on this, that a lot of people apply for that simple working capital grant, but that is an option. Okay, so the overall view of the grant application process is based on that application template. So use the template, work your way through that template. And like I said, I'm going to go through it sequentially. Anne talked about doing the executive summary first and then doing appendices, which I think is a great approach, but we're going to do it a little different just because it's easier for me to handle. So there's the access to it. You have 7 sections, and then you have an alcoholic products section, which if you're somebody like a Rick Riddle, you'd have to fill out. There's also an appendix G, which is for if you are doing something with hemp, would be required. Now there's your DUNS number. That's a Dun & Bradstreet provides a DUNS number, which is a unique 9-digit identification number for the physical location of your business. It's free, but it takes between 1 and 2 days to create. So there's the link to it. So you just go in and fill out the information based on that link, and then you'll get your DUNS number. And so if you're serious about doing this ever, I would go ahead and do my DUNS number, today when this is after the training's over. The SAM, the Systems for Award Management Registration, that's another where you register with the U.S. government, and that can take up to 10 days. And so but I believe you can somebody correct me that you need your DUNS to fulfill this one out. So do your DUNS first, then do your SAM. But don't wait to the last minute to do this. It'd be awful if you didn't have a SAM number and you had a great application, and that's why it didn't get funded. And then if you do want to use grants.gov for electronic submission, which we really don't recommend, and Anne really didn't, there's the link to it, and it's same day, but you got to have the DUNS, the SAMs, and your EIN, but that's just your IRS business number, so you should have that. 7 sections, required forms. Section 1 is your summary information. 2 is that executive summary we've mentioned. 3, general eligibility requirements. 4, applicant eligibility. 5, project eligibility. 6, evaluation criteria. 7, matching funds. We're going to talk a lot about evaluation criteria. And that's a lot of what Anne was talking about as well. How you end up scoring points, so you'll have a really good chance of being funded. There's the forms, and we're really not going to go into those too much, but you just need to go in and fill those out. So looking at the template summary section 1, your basic information, your legal name, your application type, and then the raw agricultural commodity you're going to add value to. Is it, planning or working, an amount requested, and the end and starting date of the grant, and check reserve funds and priority points if applicable, and say who prepared the application. So executive summary is the legal name of the applying entity, planning and working, application type, amount requested, project summary, project goals, how you intend to use the grant funds. You want to limit it to 1 page, but Ann talked about either making it half a page, single spaced, or a full page if you if you're double spaced. And so now we're on page 2 of the template. If you've opened up your working capital template. So where you can see where it says that legal name, those DUNS numbers. Okay, if you're applicant, check if you're an independent farmer or part of a producer group or a cooperative, et cetera. And then fill in the various other boxes that we mentioned. And also definitely if you're part of that reserve funds, or if you want to looking for priority points, you want to check those. So for example, if you're a beginning farmer, you would check that and then you document that later on. Okay, so this is just a made up example of what I think would be a good summary statement. Creating marketing value-added products has the potential to significantly enhance our farm's profitability. So our $125,000 in working capital funds will help pay for processing, marketing, distribution, and sales of our pasture-raised chickens and eggs, as well as microgreens that we grow. So you've already indicated the amount of money you're going to ask for and what you're going to do with it, and what products you're going to sell as part of that whole process. Or the $125,000 in capital funds will be used to pay labor costs. Okay, what's it going to go for to produce artisan cheeses from organic milk, and for packaging, label, and promotion, your website and product label expenses. So it achieves the project goal of increasing sales and profits and shows how you intend to use funds. So it's real important that you hit these 2 goals down at the bottom, and show even in that summary statement how you're going to use that money in a general sense. And Ann's point about doing this first, I think is excellent. Okay, stating your qualifications, state the name of your farm organization in the first sentence of the summary. Emphasize appropriate experience and training, like, just making up people. Harry and Hannah Jones are owner of a Tennessee hemp farm, or beginning farmers. Okay, extra point. So you've checked beginning farmers back in that checks box, and now you're reiterating that. Harry's a farmer, University of Florida extension agent with 20 years experience. Hannah is a member of the U.S. Angus Association and raised show cows for 12 years. They started farming in 2012, so they're still new farmers. They're less than 10 years. They planted their first hemp crop in 2015. They both have degrees from my department at UT and completed value-added training with Hal, and maybe, they work with some of the other groups that we talked about here. You want to emphasize all of that screams qualifications, and people that are doing the scoring, want to see qualifications. So going to page 3, general eligibility requirements, most of the series of check blocks regarding citizenship and other topics. Remember to include Appendix B materials regarding legal standing, articles of incorporation, And if you're a sole proprietor or independent farmer, include a copy of your farm IRS document showing farm income. You have a series of kind of application eligibility. We'll skip over that. And then if you move to section 4, and I believe we're on page 5 now. Okay, check a series of boxes. We produce the raw input to be transformed through day-to-day field operations, i.e. we are farmers. So you have to be farmers. So we had a question earlier about a shared kitchen facility, I believe. And so since it isn't farmer owned, they aren't eligible for this particular set of funding, but they'd probably be a great candidate for local foods and promotion programs. So there's other USDA programs out there that if you aren't a farmer, could easily work for you. And that's another, just reiterating what others said. You must produce and own over 50% of the raw inputs to be processed. So you can get 49% from, you can purchase that from somebody else, but you and your group, if you're a cooperative, it must be at least over 50%. You're not contract producers for others, like you're not just hired to harvest. And you maintain ownership throughout the processing, except if you're mid-tier value chain. That's the one exception. Independent producer participates in day-to-day labor management and field operation. For example, this is just an example of a statement that would address that. I grow sweet corn by applying typical agronomic practices on a daily basis throughout the growing season and market the final product that I own. Okay, so that really, I think that really covers that, that participation requirement. So section 5.1, and we're on page 10 now. Name the raw agricultural commodity that will be used as input for the product. Now you've already done this in the executive summary. So you just, if you're writing it like that, so you're just redoing that. So if it was hemp, for example, for Harry and Hannah, it would be hemp. Okay. Name your value added product, which will be as a result of the 5 different methodologies that we're about to go through. And this is just, of course, made up, but hemp oil and animal feed is a byproduct, and actually hemp waste makes a really good animal feed, but I think right now it's not legal to use it. But this is just a made up example. So moving forward to section 5.2, which I think is on the same page there, page 10. Product eligibility, value added agricultural product methodology. Another important section, so you indicate at least one value added methodology that best fits your value added product. Usually it's change in physical state. Okay, so that, i.e. that means you're actually processing something or changing the nature of it. Okay. So this would be an example, and I know this is not exactly or isn't really the way you want to process hemp, but the process for generating hemp oil from hemp is well established and currently legal in Tennessee and many other states. So it's good information to point out. The process is both legally and technically feasible or economically feasible, And then you talk about the actual process. First, you must clean the seeds from hemp stalk and other fiber after harvest. Second, a cold press is applied to effectively crush the seed flowers and extract the oil. So you actually go through the process of how you do what you're going to do. You want to do it briefly, but provide a full description. So like Rick Riddle in his application, he's going to talk about how he takes grapes and grapes are turned into wine. And, you know, it could take several pages to do that, to really do a decent job on that. And as much as you can have even references to expert opinion or scientific literature, the better off you are when you're doing that. Okay, moving on. You can also produce in a manner that enhances the value of the agricultural commodity, or a non-standard method of production that adds value. Okay, so now you're not processing per se, but you're doing something that adds value in the production. So primarily this is for an organic crop, such as organically grown tomatoes that receive a higher price than the conventionally grown tomatoes. Now, you're really probably treating those tomatoes the same no matter how you grow them, but if you grow them organically, you'd qualify under this particular method of value added. But you're going to have to demonstrate that it adds value. So you're saying you're doing this because you get a higher price. You got to demonstrate that with price data, either your own, or you could, if you had to, you could go to the economic literature and get data that indicates organic products, organic tomatoes in general receive higher prices. Okay. Okay. Physical segregation of a product, like if you have non-genetically modified corn that you will have to keep separate from genetically modified corn, you might qualify under that category. And then there's farm ranch based renewable energy. That would be another one that you could possibly qualify as a value added production methodology. And a lot of times, you know, you're taking something like manure and turning it into methane and electricity with a biogester. Biogesters tend to be, I think, the most popular use under this category. Also, locally produced agricultural food products. Okay, you're not processing or changing the physical state, but you're selling in a local market. Okay, and that is either a market that's in state or within 400 miles. So 400 miles is a long way. You can still say it's local. So you could be selling to a farmer's market. You could be outside of Nashville and selling to a farmer's market in Lexington, Kentucky, and it would be within that 400 miles. Okay, so it would be considered local agricultural food products. But you want to demonstrate what the local outputs are. Like if you're selling to a farmer's market or you're going to sell to a farmer's market, state what those farmer's markets are. And then also, as best you can, document that there's local demand for you know, what you're going to produce. So for example, if you're producing squash, I don't think, you know, you'd be able to sell it because, you know, markets tend to get flooded with things like squash in the summer. But so you'd have to show that there's real demand for what you're going to be doing locally. And once again, you can go to literature to do that, or better yet, use your own records. Okay, 5.3, you must cite one or more relevant sources to support the response statements and data from below. So responses must be supported by project-specific analysis, such as a feasibility study, marketing plan, or business plan developed for the project and included with this application. So now we're on page 11 and 12. Or for working capital that does not require such, you still must identify a relevant authority source or independent basis for the response for this data, for this information. And that would probably be for that less than 50,000. Okay, so you can either, it's expanded customer, increased revenue. So you want to document that you're getting more revenue. So discuss the estimated amount of the increased revenue resulted for the value-added product that will be available to the producer of the commodity. Okay, including a baseline of your current revenues, if you have any, from the sale of the agricultural commodity or value-added product, and an estimated target number of increased revenue that will result from the project. So you need a baseline number, and also you need to talk about the target number of customers that will result from the project. You also have to describe the benefits, and this is an example. So the direct producer benefits intended include increased sales, revenue, profit, and growth. So that states direct benefits. We're expected to see an impact on valued customer growth and sales within 4 months of grant award, extending indefinitely. So that indicates when you're going to be starting to see your increase in your customer flow after you receive the grant fundings. So indirect benefits, which is good, you can throw those in as well. That would be, if you were doing a winery, that would be increased jobs, taxes paid by you and by others, and increased demand for grapes. So that's indirect benefits. They're not necessarily going to you. And grape growing and the establishment of wineries also is helping to diversify local economies and keep land and agricultural productions as some crops become less viable. That states indirect benefits. So toward the end, when you talk about benefits, there's economic development as a benefit. This is an economic development benefit. You're diversifying your local economy, and you're keeping land in agricultural production. Okay, so that's a benefit. That's a general economic development benefit. So section 5.4, purposes and eligibility. I think now we're still on page 12. And use of funds, amount requested, fill in that box. You do your check boxes, and then you'll have a working plan and budget, your grant eligibility period, like we said, up to 36 months from when when you start the project, and project activity should begin within 90 days of the date of the award. So you just want to guess when you think there's a good time, and USDA will help with this in getting your funds, and that would generally be sometime in the summer, maybe late spring, probably summer. Okay, so you can base your planning based on that. Okay, so either your emerging market or it's a market expansion. And there's also a simplified application. We won't worry about that, but those are the 3 categories. You're going to belong to one of those 3 categories. So we're just going to talk about emerging market and a market expansion. So now we're on page 13. So if it's an emergency emerging market, if you check that box, you must demonstrate that the grant matching funds both focus on a new product and or new geography or demographic market or markets. So we have not supplied the proposed product. geographic or demographic market for more than 2 years at the time of the application submission. We have included complete copies of a third-party project-specified feasibility study and business plan related to the processing and marketing of this value-added product in Appendix C. Okay. This Gantt project proposes to implement the venture as outlined in the feasibility study and business market plans. And then you'd want to put the name of the persons completing the feasibility study, as well as the date they did so, and also the same for your business plan. Okay, so the feasibility, they're very important for the feasibility study and business plan are very important requirements for emerging market. And this is just to repeat what I just said, but we've included complete copies of that feasibility study and the business plan. And we're going to implement that plan. Okay, a feasibility study, what are some parts? Background, market analysis, site layout and facilities. So you want to talk about where you're going to do this, what your layout is in a general idea. The actual plant you're going to have and the equipment, talk about your cost structure, the people you're going to need to actually run that particular operation you're talking about, your production and marketing plan, how you're going to make and sell that, and then your financial plans. You know, what are your costs, what are your revenues, what's your profitability, and it'd be good if you had cash flow in there as well. Okay, the other option, 5.4, is market expansion. Demonstrate that the project will result in expansion of a number of customers for the product with increased revenues returning to yourself or other producers. And you want to have a detailed work plan budget and, you know, to show that you're identifying and attracting new customers. Market expansion, a feasibility study is not required. You can have a feasibility study or it can substitute a business plan or a marketing plan. So if it's a market expansion of something you're already doing, it's a little easier. Okay, so what's an example of how you might want to talk about more customers, more revenues? Well, as much as possible, use your own records. Of course, if it's a new market, you really can't do that you're invading. But cite industry reports, academic studies, or your own records. So for example, for the hemp oil industry studies, like we have an industry study that Hal did, he just published, but that Hal's work indicated that the demand for hemp oil has grown by such and such since say 2010, and is expected to grow by 1,000%, you know, whatever number that's actually in his report by 2025. So you're documenting more demand, more revenue. Based on national numbers, we expect the number of Tennessee customers using our hemp oil will be 2,000 from a base of 0. So we're indicating, you know, where we're starting out from. In this case, it's a new market, so it's 0. We expect to grow by 2,000 based on our estimated level of production and projected demand growth to lead at least $100,000 in revenue, or it'd be new revenue if you're growing from a base. But here it's from a base of 0 based on projected production of 2,000 gallons at $50 per gallon. So, you know, you're documenting everything, and your revenues are documented based on what you're producing and what that price that you expect to get. And then you're backing that up with, you know, various sources of information. You're talking about what your customer base, you're going to be selling to people in Tennessee, not nationally, for example. And so that's all good information to include in your effort. The work plan, budget, and narrative. So now we're on toward the bottom of page 14. But you want to provide a clear and concise budget and tie project activities to the budget. And if you go to 15 and 16, you can see where there's various tables which you can use to work in your numbers for specific project task. And then, just make sure, use a spreadsheet, for example, to make sure that those all sum up to what you need in your final value. Everything needs to be consistent. So the work plan and budget specifics, you want to describe how eligible activities will go to meeting project goals, show budget allocation for eligible activities, identify key personnel for conducting and overseeing activity. You want a time frame in there. You want to show how grant and matching funds are used to support activities, and grant period timelines, meeting starting and ending date requirements. So you need to stay within your overall framework of when you're starting and ending, for example. Okay, so for example, key personnel activities meeting goals. For example, we want to do a web page. So we're going to have a web page. That's a specific activity that we're going to be funding under this grant. A web page designed to enhance hemp oil sales will be constructed by Dr. Jane Smith for sales growth of hemp oil. And Harry Jones will oversee the activity. Harry actually works for you, or you are Harry, or part of the organization. An advertising firm will be hired to market hemp oil, hence facility marketing growth. And Hannah Jones will oversee that activity. Budget allocated to specific activities and how funds are used. $5,000 will go to Dr. Smith for the new website, and an advertising firm will be paid $10,000. And they'll do things like advertise in industry magazines, for example. So very specific about what you're getting funded, how that money's being spent, and who and what and where. You need to provide time frames for completing the task. May 1st, 2020, initiate meeting with Dr. Smith regarding web page design. So you're expecting to get your funding before May 1st, slightly before May 1st. But remember, you need to start within 90 days of when you get the funding. June 1, 2020, follow-up meeting with Dr. Smith regarding progress of the web page work. And then August 1st, Dr. Smith will give you a draft version. So you can use these boxes that they provided to think through your work time, work plan, the time, the who, the action. And this is just, putting this kind of in a spreadsheet framework or a table framework of what we just talked about. Okay, so when it happens, who's involved, and the action that's done. So for example, making that website rather, and preliminary results have been provided to you, and that website's then been constructed, by the end of July 1 by Dr. Smith. You want a project budget summary example. This is on page 15. Your task name, description, and responsible parties, Dr. Smith. What's the activity, website development? When's that starting date? May 1st. When's the ending date? August 1. The value to produce a grant that's going to go to funds that's going to go to this is $15,000. And then you know, your matching dollars all has to be put in. And so you'll document this in the matching appendix, but 5,000, you know, you'll put in as cash match for this example. So you'll actually pay 5,000 out of your own pocket, 10,000 in kind matching funds. That could be your time, for example, devoted to working with the website developer. And so total project cost. So you need to do this for all your major activities. You also need to talk about the gross income to be generated by project activities, and then the cost, and then generate, you know, how much profit or income you'll get from that at the bottom of page 15 there. So, you know, this is must provide a budget for each task. So this is just like what we talked about previously. Okay, so how are we doing, Hal? Do we want to break or keep going?
This would probably be a good time to take like a 5-minute break, honestly.
Okay.
Let's do that. Good.
Okay, let me get back to where I was.
All right. Appreciate the comment that's in the chat box from Bell Hollow Beef that received the Value-Added Producer Grant last year. They offered to answer questions that people have. You can email Rhonda at rsbellar@gmail.com. That's very generous to offer to answer questions about their experience and what they learned. Thank you. Okay, you're welcome to start back anytime you're ready, David.
Okay. So now we're shifting gears and we're going to talk about evaluation criteria and scoring. So nature of the proposed venture, qualifications of the project personnel, commitment and support. So, you know, Rick Riddle mentioned just putting in a little bit of your own money, $100 as cash match. That'll get you points. We'll talk about that. Work plan and budget and priority points. So for example, if you are a veteran owned or minority owned or woman owned business, that's how you can get priority points, and we'll discuss that. So in section 6.1, you need to demonstrate the number of jobs generated or saved. So you will discuss how that's done. So you say, for example, the increased production and sales. Now we're on page 17. Of 25% annually over the 3-year period of the grant at our hint operation is expected to create and or save 5 full-time equivalents. And that's a 100% increase in current staffing, you know, just as an example. Then they have some discussion of how you calculate full-time equivalents. That's included. And so you want to use that, you know, in filling out that form. But then from section 3, we talk about the current customer baseline, your anticipated number of customers to increase, your current baseline revenues, anticipated increase in revenues. You want to fill in those numbers. Okay, so that's at the bottom of page 17. Okay, proposal evaluation criteria. You want to apply at least one performance evaluation criteria. Okay. So is the project serving the targeted customer base described in the business plan? have projected increases in revenues been realized, and projected outputs related to special topics met, for example, meeting local food needs. So, you know, in a planning grant, would be projected returns on investment be realized? And did the feasibility study evaluate economic, market, technical, financial, and managerial feasibility aspects? So these will all be ways of being evaluated for the project. So provide at least one performance evaluation for your grant project to be evaluated by if awarded funding. So one of the below, is the project serving the target customer market described in the new business plan? So if it indicated earlier, you know, you're providing something for new Tennessee customers, you would indicate new Tennessee customers. So would the project realize the expected commitments for the new customers? Earlier you said 2,000 new customers, so that's what you would indicate here. And will that project realize the expected increase in revenues for agricultural producers? Earlier you said $100,000 increase in revenues, so that's what you want to put in here. So the agency selects and ranks applications based on responses to these 5 criteria, as I indicated earlier. Commitment and support is 10 points. Qualification of project personnel is 20 points. Your work plan and budget is 20 points. The nature of your proposed venture, what you're actually trying to do and how well you've documented that, and you know how feasible it is 30 points, and the priority points can be 10 points. And USDA can award 10 more points to give it vision project based on program funding priorities rather. For example, if you're in a really identified county that really needs economic development, we'll give some examples later. You must have a minimum of 50 points to qualify, okay, out of these total that you can grab. So 1 of 6 priority categories. Now, I've seen applications where they've checked more than one, and maybe you can do that, but you really only need to check one. Beginning farmer, socially disadvantaged farmer or ranchers, veteran, if you're a mid-tier value chain project, or small, medium-sized farm or ranch, or farmer or rancher cooperative, if you check one of those, you'll get priority points. Group applicants, producer group, and majority control cooperative, and creates or increases market opportunities for beginning socially advantaged or small, medium farms. You need to do that if you're a group or a cooperative. You'll get priority points. And then the administrative is, like we said, awarded by rural development. Nature of the proposed project. And now we're on page 18. It's the most important component. You can see that by the the scoring points we looked at earlier. Clearly describe your goals. Support goals would publish data or other third-party information, like a scientific study, something from the literature that you grab off the web. And Google Scholar, if you Google Scholar, it will take you to refereed studies if you need refereed studies, things that people like Hal and I and others put out that have been peer reviewed. Prior experience producing and marketing value added or similar products is good to show. Indicate experience with similar markets or successful ventures rather. So all of those meeting these criteria help you get these 30 points. Nature of the proposed project, technical feasibility, discuss the process, potential markets and distribution channels, discuss technical feasibility based on similar products and or markets, published data and other third-party information that we talked about. Operational efficiency, use experience, data, information to describe or lay out your efficiency. Discuss how the process works and any challenges and any anticipated challenges or risk. And Ann talked about that, how you want to talk about possible risk and then how you're going to address those. In terms of profitability, once again, third-party data references, trend, industry norm or follow formula, or your experience with similar products or markets. So here you could use your own data. But, you know, earlier we talked about, you know, citing information that industry groups have generated that you can use, for example, like that Hemp USA example that I made up, or the study by Howe that I made up. You can use that to identify that we think this is going to be a profitable effort. Economic sustainability, is this going to be viable in the future, say 4 or 5 years down the road? You want to talk about known risk factors and what might be required to sustain your future efforts. So as we grow, how are we going to deal with growth, for example? You know, what's the risk of hiring new employees and working with new employees? And you probably want to talk about that. Okay, so to get 25 to 30 points, the highest scoring category, all criteria and components are well addressed. They're supported by third-party information. You have cited studies and you have a bibliography. So somewhere in your document, you actually have a bibliography which shows who you cited, like writing a research paper, and it demonstrates a high likability of success. That'll get you that 23 to 30 points under the nature of the proposed project. Qualification of personnel. You identify everyone responsible for managing and performing work plan tasks, including a summary of their qualifications and expertise. So, you know, earlier we talked about all the training we'd had and the qualification, what we've actually done. So that, you know, that's an effort to score points here. And a lot of this is done in your work plan, where you talk about what people are going to be doing in terms of their roles, responsible commitments, and availability. So Ann was talking about doing the work plan early, and this is why it's important. It helps indicate the roles of your project personnel. That's one of the reasons it's important. Education obtained, we talked about that earlier. Past and current professional experience, relevant training. For example, our hypothetical people had gone through CPA training. Especially you want to indicate items indicating agricultural experience. And to get 15 to 20 points, all personnel demonstrate strong, relevant credentials of experience and availability, and thus indicating a high likelihood of project success. So you're using good people and you've demonstrated what specific tasks those good people are going to be doing in your grant application. Commitment and support. If you're an independent producer, 1 to 2 points. Okay, your end user or customer, and talked about this. Getting those letters of support indicating the need for your product, and tie this support to your proposed activity. So you want to, and I'd recommend you write the draft letter for them, and then they can change it however they want to, but their signature will go on to that. So you want to do that as early as you possibly can, because if you're getting input from somebody else, you can't wait to the last minute. So for example, with the hemp example, you talk about a store you might be selling your hemp oil to. And That store would in turn provide a letter of support indicating that, yes, they're going to market your product and you have this relationship. And it's tied into your activity. What are you making? Hemp oil. And this is how you're going to sell it. And this is my customer. And this is documentation of that. Third-party providers, technical or necessary help that can give level, they give level and qualification, how much they're involved, for example. So I know of a situation where somebody's putting in a project, a value-added producer grant project, and then they're going to generate data out of that and have that data analyzed. Okay, so that's third-party help. That third-party provider needs to write a letter indicating their willingness to provide that technical support, for example, analyze that data and produce a report as outlined in the proposal. Okay, and then the qualification of that person would need to be stated. And you want to highlight their qualifications in the proposal. So for example, if you're using HAL in a proposal to support some value-added activity as a third-party provider, you brag about all the stuff that he's done, which, there's a lot of things to brag about. Okay. Nature and quality of commitment, all in kind, 1 point. If you get both, you get 2 points. So put in, like Rick said, just put in a little bit of cash match and that'll get you 2 points. You probably don't want to do all cash match. For example, if you're applying for $100,000 value-added producer grant, then you're putting in $100,000 in cash match, but just putting in a little bit gets you that 2 points. So why not put in $100 to get 1 extra point? And here again, the best you can do is get 9 to 10 points, or that's a good commitment. Commitment and support, 7 to 10 points. You've shown strong financial commitment to the project in the form of cash matching contributions. You're getting participation from additional producers. That helps if they're involved. You've demonstrated those 3 people that Ann talked about that are going to be end users of what you're doing, who you're selling to, and you've shown commitment of tangible support from multiple third-party contributors, like university personnel or nonprofits, for example. They're going to assist you in this. People like Pete's organization, they're going to assist you with your effort. And you've documented all that with letters of support to talk about what they're specifically going to do. Work plan and budget, 15 to 20 points, provides a clear and concise comprehensive work plan. You're detailing all your project goals, tasks, timelines, cost, and responsible personnel in a logic and realistic manner. And you've shown a high likelihood of success. So early on in the work plan, I was trying to get you a sense going through those specific tasks of, you're detailing your project goals, and you're using this worksheet to indicate the tasks, the timeline, the cost, and who's the responsible person and personnel in this project. And using the worksheet really forces you to go through the process in such a manner, well, you'll get the points that you need under this work plan and budget criteria. So administrative or priority categories can be up to 10 points. If eligible and documented, you can get 10 extra points. And so it improves geographic diversity and or fosters persistent growth in persistent poverty counties or helps reduce unemployment. You must have never received a value-added producer grant, and indicate how it supports 1 of 5 areas like e-connectivity, quality of life, rural workforce, economic development. Remember, we talked about earlier with indirect benefits. You can reuse that and talk about how it helps support economic development in some place like Union County where it's really needed, where Rick's operation is. Section 7, matching fund verification. And it's just a list of those appendices. And like Ann said, you want to really tackle those early. So you want to put in a verification of matching funds, like cash, like you have to specifically list where the cash is matched, like in a particular bank account. A loan, if you're putting in loan money that you borrowed, you have to describe the use of the loan and line of credit, and your lender must sign it. So here again, you want to do this early. And then you need to verify in kind. For example, if somebody's putting in $10,000 worth of their time, you want to talk about how many hours they're putting in and roughly a wage rate or a pay rate that they make to justify that $10,000 that they're putting in terms of in-kind match, which would be effort. So for example, when I apply for funding for USDA Rural Development Funding, there's a cash or a match requirement. I'll say, well, I'm going to put in 2 weeks of my time a year, and this is what I paid, and this is the my benefits, and so that all has to be documented. So the nature of any donated goods and services and how they use, you need to justify that value and when they will be donated if you're using donated items. And, for example, we talked about the church hall. There also has to be something that passes the Snell test. You can't just say, well, I'm using my house. That's not, I don't think that would pass. You or family members can't be over 25% in kind. And you must do these steps for family members or other. It's a one-to-one match. We said earlier, it's better to err on the side of conservative than it is to seek out every penny as a match. So don't go in saying we're going to apply for $250,000. Go in and say we're going to apply for something that's reasonable, and that we can also match, because getting too greedy might throw you into being an ineligible application. If it's disallowed expenditure for the grant, then it can't be used as a match. So for example, you can't use your building as a match, the use of your building, because it's not allowed under the grant. And so infrastructure, including in machinery in general, isn't allowed as an in-kind match. But I would talk to USDA Rural Development, because if it's movable equipment, it might be eligible, it might not be. You would want to cover that with them. Like we said, cash match scores higher, and at least some cash match is a good idea. You can't match from other federal grants, and must be verified using market rates. Don't overmatch. We've talked about that. You can donate your time or somebody else's. For example, a feasibility study consultant provides extra work as a match. And I think, in fact, the one that I did, I provided extra work as a match. But those must be documented based on IRS rates, for example, when you're working with a consultant. So, document. Working capital, raw materials can be used as a match, like crops that you use. For example, if you were going to do one for cider, or cidery, making cider out of your own apples, the values of apples that you grew could be used as a match. Now you want to document that value. You want to talk about the amounts you want to use. You want to be consistent with the rest of the grant. And then you want to put some market value on those apples. Okay, priority points. Check one if possible. Beginning farmer or rancher. That's if you haven't been at it 10 years. If you're under 10 years, you can check that. If you're honorably discharged veteran, you can check that. Socially disadvantaged, minority or woman-owned operation, you can check that. a small or medium-sized family farm, grossing less than $1 million annually 3 years prior to the application, you can check that. If you're cooperative, or if you're mid-tier value chain project, for example, a farm to school alliance would be a mid-tier value chain project. Now you can check multiples, but you're not going to get points for multiples, but checking one, you'll get points. Reservation funds. This is 10% of total dollars initially reserved. It will go to, and so what that's saying is they have a goal of wanting 10% of the total funding across the country going to either beginning new farmers or ranchers, or socially disadvantaged farmers or ranchers, or mid-tier value chain project. Also, 10% of reserve funds are set aside for applicants located in persistent poverty counties. These are the persistent poverty counties for Tennessee. And it's a designation that Economic Research Service at USDA makes. And if you really want the website for that, I can send it to you. But it sees what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 counties for persistent poverty in Tennessee. It's not the same list as the 19 distressed and 33 at-risk counties used by TDA. And Will earlier talked about TDA has a goal of trying to fund projects in distressed counties. Currently, there are 19 distressed counties. And so Grundy is both a distressed county, a TDA distressed county, and a persistent poverty county. But then there are other counties like Perry County, which is not in this list, that would be one of the 19. So you just need to check with this link here to see what the 19 and the 33 are. But that didn't really help you with this grant, but it might help you with other processes. Although I would use that in this grant. I would say use that in the economic development part of it, for example, if I was in a distressed county. Like Union County is a distressed county. Okay, Tennessee has historically low levels of funding, but that unfortunately has changed. Start early. I do those registrations like the done number right away. I would contact USDA Rural Development Tennessee office now. Use your template. It's lots of work, but it can be worth the effort, even if you don't get the funding this time around. And there's some links to some of the resources that I cited. Okay, Hal, that's it.
Great job, David. Thank you very much. We've got some questions in the chat box, and we've had some help in responding to these, but someone has asked how they can find out if their county is a disadvantaged county.
Well, like I just tried to say, it depends on what you mean by disadvantaged. The 6 persistent poverty are the ones that are, the persistent poverty are the ones that I listed. And so these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, I'm sure they're also part of the distress, but there are 11 others that are distressed. You can go to the website that's listed here, and I think that will take you, in fact, I'll try to do it right now, to the distress, and it might not load, but that will take you to the counties that are distressed or at risk. Okay, and so you can look at this website, and then if it loads, you can find out, what category your county falls into.
Very good. Okay.
And if you have problems getting to it, I can send it to you as well.
Okay. Another question was, does the veteran farmer go into the same reserve fund as the beginning farmers?
It seems to be yes. I think
Okay.
those are all part of that 10%.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments for Dr. Hughes? Really appreciate this description, this taking things one step at a time. This has been real helpful, David, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so if there are any that want to set up a time to meet with Dr. Hughes and me and Pete, I know we've got one person lined up for 2:30, but if someone would like to do it at 3 o'clock, that would be, we'd be able to do that. I'm going to post again this link to the evaluation. So if you haven't already completed that, we appreciate your doing that. I think there's another question or two here. Do both the feasibility study and the business plan need to be third party?
Chuck, what do you say?
Yes, they do. Yeah, they have to be completed by a third party.
Now, but that doesn't mean that the person requesting the funds can't be involved and really needs to be involved in doing both of those, correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, no one knows you better than you know yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, you just need someone qualified to put it all together and present it.
Very good, Chuck. Thank you. So
you're welcome.
There's another question here. Is this application format similar to other federal opportunities, RFAs, RFI, et cetera?
I don't know of any other grant that I would consider real similar as far as the application format to the VAPG, but now take in mind, I only deal with rural development grants. So if it's not one of ours, then I'm not likely to know a lot about it. I can tell you that rural development doesn't have any other that are quite as detailed as this one.
But in general, applying for federal funds is complicated.
Yeah, I mean, you know, every federal grant's going to have one similarity, or should have, is the SF 424, which is the standard uniform application for federal assistance. But other than that, you know, it's going to vary, and this is one of the more, when I say detailed, I mean written detailed grants that we have. The only other grant we have that's probably close is the Rural Business Development Grant. And I mean, you know, and it's different in that it's for nonprofits and public bodies, not for individuals.
Okay. So I see that we've got one comment from Bell Hollow Farm saying that they did not do a feasibility study, but they did write their own business plan. If you do the research and compare several templates, it is possible. Okay.
Did they have somebody else sign off on it though?
Surely. Maybe we can get a response back on that.
Yeah.
To be sure.
I'm not 100% sure if the business plan requires it, but I feel certain the feasibility study is. I'm gonna look at the regulations, see what I can find.
Yeah.
I think this is Rick. I think we did our own business plan but we had to get an outside consultant to help us with the feasibility plan. But there's no stipulation on who that might be. We used our state director for our association to work through the feasibility plan. So that might be, you know, the president of one of the pick Tennessee product organizations, agritourism, you know, somebody on your local cattle association, if you're looking at cattle or beef, or so I guess what I'm trying to say is don't make it harder than what it is.
Okay, so
there you go. I just posted something right out of the reg.
See, response here was that actually they worked with Valerie at the state. I don't know who Valerie
That's just our, she's our field specialist that they worked with. She used to work in the Nashville office. Now she's in Greenville.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, Chuck, maybe I was the qualified consultant on the one for the two businesses, since I'm not part of the ownership. So,
yeah,
so
I
maybe
mean,
I wrote them as a qualified consultant. You're right.
I mean, my answer to that would be is, you know, the feasibility study, we're gonna want it to be from somebody outside. If you do your own business plan and you present something that appears to meet the requirements, then we're not going to press the issue real hard. Technically, based on the reg, it sounds like it should be a qualified consultant. So I would just recommend finding someone that can sign off on it with you or for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nothing says you can't put it all together yourself and do the legwork, and then, you know. And I'm not going to promise you that if you end up signing it yourself and you don't, that we're going to catch it. I mean, there is so much to review in these applications. Sometimes stuff like that can slip through the cracks. But we would encourage you to do it per the regulation.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for sticking with us today, and we really appreciate the level of interest that everyone has expressed, and also really appreciate the presenters and all of their time and energy, effort being with us today and helping answer these questions. I feel like this was really helpful to everyone. So thank you for doing that. We'll hang around for another minute or two. We've got another couple of meetings already lined up for this afternoon.
Excuse me.
That. Yes, hi.
How do you, I've been asking, how do you schedule an appointment once you guys finish to talk with you more about the project?
I think you had asked me for one at 3 o'clock, and I was just getting to try to respond back to you. That time works for you. We'll try to do that or shortly thereafter, and I will send you a link.
Thank you.
Sure.